Welcome everybody to our panel discussion on the evolution of Asian cuisine. I'm really happy to welcome our guest chefs here from the Asian Food Mafia, which is a coalition of Asian chefs and restaurateurs based in New York City throughout the boroughs. They kind of created this group to help advance Asian cuisine in the city, to help each other out, and also really to drive the conversation how Asian cuisine will be evolving in the city and beyond. So I'll let the chefs introduce themselves.
Sure, I'm Chris Cheung, and I'm the chef owner of East Wing Snack Shop in Brooklyn, one in Soho, and then I also have Tanso in Nashville, Tennessee.
My name is Doron Wong. I own Rivers and Hill Hospitality Group. We own and operate Northern Tiger. We have a farm in upstate New York that does chickens, USA Slaughterhouse. We also have a project in Austin, Texas called General Soboy.
My name is Edward Lin, and along with my wife, Lien Lin, we're the chef owners of Bricolage, modern Vietnamese gastropub in Park Slope, Brooklyn.
Hi, Medwin Pang, chef and owner of Hunger Pang in Flatbush, Brooklyn. New American Asian influenced with a focus on fresh and seasonal ingredients.
Cool. So we'll start with an easy question for all of you, or maybe not. Walk us through quickly what your story is. Kind of what brought you to kind of the Asian food scene in New York City, and what brought you to Asian Food Mafia?
Okay, so for me, I grew up in Chinatown in Manhattan a long, long time ago, and grew up as an Asian American, eating lots of Chinese food in Chinatown. Grew up on that with my grandmother and my mother and the whole family, and we kind of we lived that immigrant experience. My grandmother and grandfather came into America in the 1920s, and they settled in a tenement in Chinatown, and they had 6 kids, one of them being my mother, and we all grew up in that two very small 2-bedroom tenement house on Mott Street in Chinatown. And my mother later on moved out. We moved to Brooklyn, so I had kind of had the American experience living in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn at the time. And if you could tell this accent, I grew up with a lot of Italian and Irish Americans out there, and went to school there. But we'd always come back to Chinatown. That was always home, coming back to Chinatown, going out to eat with the family, and and things, and I grew up from there, and became a chef a little later on, and used a lot of those experiences I had to influence my food. Shooting all the way up to kind of the present day. Last year, I formed Asian Food Mafia. I had opened up East Wing Snack Shop, and I made a lot of friends when I did that. So everybody included here became a very good friend. We're all chef owners of Asian restaurants, and I thought, what a great idea. A lot of us are out there now. Asian food is a big deal now. It's mainstream, but we're all independent. We're all solo. We're all kind of out there on our own. And I thought we'd have a bigger voice, banding together, and to do a whole bunch of things. Kind of influencing the way Asian food is doing right now in New York City. That was an important thing. Another important thing was to have a voice about what it is to be an Asian American and run a restaurant in this city. And then also just to hang out with a bunch of chef friends and talk shop, and be able to kind of get together once a month and rant and rave about what drives you crazy, and to have some support with that. And these guys, and we also have a longer membership of some guys that weren't able to make it here today, but we have a nice group of about 7 or 8 chefs that we get together, we hang out once a month, we plan events like this, and we let off some steam. So all cool stuff.
Story? Your story?
Well, my story is a little bit different. I started in Boston. I'm from Boston. And I started when I was 14, just for fun. Just, when you're kids, you just kind of figure that, you just want to do something to not, just get out of the house. And I ended up getting a job in this California bistro, and was making pizzas, answering phones, and it just kind of created a lot of curiosity of like, oh, okay, how do you make that? And you know, I was working straight through high school. Then I went, you know, kind of thought that that was going to be like my calling, and went to culinary school. And right after culinary school, went to New York City. You know, because if you're going to go anywhere in the world, you're going to have to come to New York City and work with the best. And I spent some time with David Burke. This is kind of like his earlier years at Park Ave Cafe. I don't know if you guys know what Park Ave Cafe is. And then there was there, you know, being the Chinese in the kitchen, you're always being picked on, like, you know, oh, these Chinese, why isn't he cooking Chinese food, you know? And it just kind of made me think, you know, maybe I should actually kind of learn my roots, and I should go back and cook Chinese food. So I actually packed my bags and went to Hong Kong. I was like 18 years old. And I went to Hong Kong, spent time in the kitchen in Hong Kong, Singapore, you know, got beaten down, you know. Even in the United States, we're Chinese, and then when we're in Asia, where they called me, you know, it was funny because they called me banana because I was like literally white, but I'm yellow, you know. So, you know, it's just trying to fit in. Came back to New York, worked at a bunch of places, you know, United Nations, and then I was like, yeah, you know, I think I really need to really concentrate on one thing that I feel very passionate about, you know, and that's how I actually started to do very regional Chinese cooking. And that's kind of what really drove me into what we do right now, especially with the support group. You know, it's a lot easier, you know.
Well, my parents are refugees. I'm a refugee from Vietnam. My parents fled to Hong Kong, where I was born, and then we were sponsored to the United States by a Catholic church, and my parents ended up doing restaurant work here because, you know, they were uneducated, came from a really small town in Vietnam, and so I grew up in the restaurant industry. And all my memories, fondest memories, was surrounded by food and family. That's where I was most happy, and both my parents cook, so I decided to follow in their footsteps, which of course they were not happy about when I was a teenager. And I'm just very passionate about food. I want to stay close to my culture because I've already lost the language. My parents coming here to the United States, they wanted to learn English, and so they didn't speak to us in Chinese, so we would learn the language. And this is the way I connect to who I am, and I don't want to lose that. And so then I went into the restaurant industry, worked with Charles Fawn at the Slanted Door for over 10 years. And then my husband and I made our way over here, and we opened our first restaurant in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And we're very happy to be a part of this group, and I think, yeah, all our voices banding together really help propel or change what we're trying to do with the Asian food culture here.
Go ahead. I'm like,
They have parallel stories.
okay. I grew up in kind of like Santa Cruz and Palo Alto in California, where your other part of Google is. But like I actually grew up like a very like not, it wasn't so connected with food and everything. It was, you know, it was a academic science, you know, background from my dad, and like I went through college, you know. And like at some point something kind of clicked in my head and said, you know what, like I don't know if I want to work in a lab or work on a computer for, you know, for the near future.
It was fate that brought us together.
Yes.
we met in culinary school.
So I went to culinary school. I saw her there the first day, and I was like,
We fell in love, and the rest is history. A restaurant and 2 kids later, here we are.
But I worked in some of the best fine French kitchens, like. With even with Daniel Hum when he was over in San Francisco, and like at some point, you know, I met Charles and started working at Slanted Door as well, like learning about Asian cuisine, learning about, you know, a different way of kind of looking and thinking about how cuisine like how a food fits with a culture, and the history of the culture is like a lot of the history of a culture is really based on its food, and definitely it's been an evolution of thought there. So, yeah. I'll go.
Right on. Okay, well, I'm going to take it back before my time. My father is from Hong Kong. We have a little village there, Sung Hing Tong in the Phan Ling area in the New Territories. My father had to flee Hong Kong for whatever reasons, I don't know. Being a British colony, UK passport, ends up in the UK where he meets my mom. They do a few things there. He had a couple of restaurants, and then that one was blown up by the IRA, which we took the insurance money and then moved to Brooklyn when I was just a month old. And then my father was like a purveyor to restaurants. He supplied restaurants with like, you know, all their wares and goods and everything. And my mother worked in the hospitality industry, like in hotels, like the Plaza, Waldorf Astoria. So I'm coming from two different sides, right? Like there was the food side, and then there was like the I guess the upscale world of hospitality. And yeah, being super fortunate to be in New York, I got my start when I was 17, and I worked in a few kitchens, and then I was looking for a job, and just by dumb luck, I didn't even know what like 3-star food was. I walked into Park Avenue Cafe and dropped off my resume, and they brought me in. I thought I was going in for an interview, so I was wearing, you know, like a button-up shirt and everything. And they were like, no, you're here to cook. And so they threw me whites, and I was like, oh, okay. And like got in, got the job, and then that was my entrance into like fine dining. Hopped around from different restaurants, and starting so young, working like 14 hours a day for years, and not having like any holidays, like Thanksgiving didn't exist, Christmas didn't exist, New Year's didn't exist. Like you're kind of like a myth. You don't really exist. Like you only exist in your work, right? And so when I was 27, I was kind of a little bit burnt out, and so I left the restaurants. I was doing graphic design as like a hobby, and the timing was perfect because a buddy of mine just took over the art director's position at the startup at the time called Vitamin Water. So he asked me if I wanted to come on board, and I did, and I was doing print production. I was doing all packaging, labels, and all of that. And then Coca-Cola came in, took us on, and so I stuck with them for a number of years, you know, for obvious reasons. They take care of their employees, like I'm sure you guys are well taken care of now. And then, you know, layoffs happened. I got hit by a round, and where we live, my wife and I she was like, well, you know, you have an idea. You're only happy when you're talking about food, eating food, cooking food, like, and the neighborhood needs something. Like, we have a concept. Let's see if we can make it happen. Stars align, shop becomes available, and then next thing you know, Hunger Pang exists. And here we are 3 years in. And yeah, I mean, it was stressful because, I mean, I'm completely independent. Like it's only me and my wife. We don't have any investors, no partners to like share like the responsibility. So everything falls on me. So when Chris came up with this idea and like thought of this group, like it was like for me, like at first I was like, wait a second, there's other people that are gonna understand exactly what, you know, I'm dealing with. And that first night that we met, like we all just clicked like immediately, because it's really special to have. I mean, because what we do is so unique, and it takes so much of your time, and there's not a lot of people that understand like what we do and the amount that, you know, it requires from you. So to have people that know what you're going through really is it's wonderful. So yeah, that's my story, and that's how I ended up here.
Thank you all for sharing your stories. It sounds like quite a diverse group and quite a diverse number of backgrounds and reasons for kind of jumping into the restaurant industry. I think a common thread that I'm hearing is, you know, you all kind of stumbled into AFM and found Asian Food Mafia and found that it was just really helpful to you. Can you tell me a little bit more about kind of what the group has done for you as a restaurateur, as a chef?
Well, as Medwin was kind of just alluding to, as anybody who has ambitions to be great in the restaurant business, at some point in your career, you find yourself alone. You know, your family is there, but they don't really understand what you go through, the long hours, the dedication to cooking, and there's many facets to the restaurant business that you have to put your hands into when you start to become and run your own place. So you do find yourself out there by yourself alone and having to deal with a lot of the stresses. And you're talking money stress, you're talking about the everyday stress of what happens in a restaurant, water pipe busts, the garbage didn't get picked up, one of the cooks doesn't show up, and this happens on a daily basis. So you find yourself, looking for ways to kind of relieve some of these things. And life is life, right? So you find yourself really you take it as it comes and you keep going and you just keep going forward. But I think what Asian Food Mafia has done in an intangible way, there's tangible things that we've done. We do events and we've done some things for charities, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. But intangibly, what it's done for each one of us is let us have an avenue to figure some things out with like minds. Yeah. And when you put on top of that we're also we share the same origins of culture, and we've kind of gone through the same things as Asians in this business that are kind of unique to our own problems. It definitely is a good thing to kind of be able to pick up the phone or send a text or a message and be like, can you help me out with this? Or can you help me out with that? And everybody in the group will respond with the way that they think that they can help you. And when you do find yourself alone in this business and have to, and know that you can rely on some really good friends that know exactly what you're going through, it makes for a really, really cool thing. So that's,
Yeah, I think definitely the support part of it, emotionally, mentally, and physically, has helped all of us make it through a day or two, Even if it's like, oh, can I borrow your dishwasher who's off today, because mine didn't show up. Or like words of advice, sharing purveyors and contact information has been very invaluable. Just sharing our stories and our love and passion for food, because opening a restaurant is not about, oh, I love to cook, let me open a restaurant. It is nothing like that, let me tell you.
You're the bookkeeper, you're the plumber, you're the electrician.
When you're knee deep in the sewer, scooping out because of the flooding in the basement.
Yeah. There's, it's kind of entrepreneurship. Well, it is absolutely entrepreneurship. But like a restaurant encompasses, I think, every aspect of a business, and usually in such a small capacity that you kind of have to wear all these hats. And that was something that kind of drew me to the business, is like, you're not just focused on one thing. You're focused on, or you're wearing every hat. You're doing, HR, PR, finances, cooking, mechanical, electrical, plumbing,
counseling,
a lot of counseling nowadays. Let me tell you, it's like hand holding, cooks and babysitting, and like getting everyone into a good mental morale, a nice morale space, like that really is such a key part of running the business.
Yeah. Trying to run a successful business.
And then finding a way to get your message out there so that people come, because like that, especially in New York, that's the hardest part.
And aside from the challenges that we can all help each other with and being part of that support group, one of the, I guess, more enjoyable things that we get to do together is during our meetings, like every so often, we'll do it in each of one of our restaurants. And I think the last one was at my place. Was it at my place? Yeah. So like when I'm thinking of new dishes, I'm like, well, like I ask my customers, like I put out a plate, I'm like, what do you think of this? And like for 90% of the time, they're going to tell you, oh, it's great, without any like real critical feedback. But being, surrounded by your peers, like I'm like, if I put a dish in front of them, like, I remember each of their critiques on it, so it's like you get great feedback from things that you're trying to work on and develop. And you also, when you go to other houses, like you can be inspired by other things that, you know, the rest of the group are doing. So yeah.
Yeah, we've gotten close, very close over the last couple of years where, you know, as a chef, when you're the chef of your own restaurant, you know, you have people under you that, you know, that are great cooks, but to kind of band together with a group of really talented chefs that are on your level and we're all kind of rising up together, that's a really, really cool thing to have. You know, everybody kind of likens it, you know, when we were kids, you wanted to join a band, and you know, you listen to, you know, the great musicians, and they all kind of come together and they play. You know, when we do events, it's kind of like that. When you kind of look over and you see, you know, 5 or 6 really good chefs that are on your level, and you're all cooking together, and you all kind of, you know, have the same thing going forward, the same goals, and then the same goals long term for your restaurant, but the same goals for like the instantaneous moment of how food comes out. And you know, when you're doing cooking together, it's one of those things that kind of really gets you going, gives you a rush, and you know, you kind of hold on to that rush for a while. You know,
It's funny because a lot of people would think like we're supposed to be competition. You know, especially these guys are in the same neighborhood, but shouldn't you guys be like competitive?
We
know,
have
but
customers. I have customers that come in and, you know, rave about his restaurant and say, you know, he's one of the favorites that they go to, and you know, and I'm glad. I'm really happy that we can share a customer base that's happy with both our spaces. So, you know.
Yeah, sure.
yeah, I'm also very glad that, you know, it's not about doing better than the other person. You know, it's about, you know, because I feel like we're a little bit behind in the Asian food, that we're able to kind of elevate it together.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people really do understand that Chinese food, and I can say Chinese food, right? Yeah, Chinese food. People don't pay for Chinese food, right? Especially I had this problem when I had a restaurant called Yunnan Kitchen, and everyone's like, "Oh man, your plates are so small," you know, and you know, why is this different than Chinatown? How can Chinatown you actually have a plate of noodles that's like, you know, $5 and it's like 4 times your size, you know? And for us, I think we're all trying to kind of elevate what we do. We're using clean food. I think a lot of it is clean. You know, they push a lot of clean, sustainable food as well. And we're doing that together as a group. You know, it's very hard to change people's perception of what Chinese food is, especially Chinese food. You know, everyone thinks ghetto Chinese food is General Tso chicken with this yellow fried rice, and it's and it's got to have a can of Coke for $5. You know,
Vietnamese food is banh mi and pho. You know,
Yeah.
there's so much more to Vietnamese food. There are so many dishes and different regions of the cuisine that people haven't explored yet. You know, and to be able to serve it in the kind of setting that we serve it in, and the beverage program that we offer alongside with the food, it's just a different experience that I wanted to bring to the neighborhood.
I mean, that's like, it's definitely one thing. You know, you can go to, you know, a pizza by the slice joint and get a slice for $1. You can go to Roberta's and, you know, buy a pie for 20 something. You know, like it can, and like one is not the same as the other. You know, like it, and the same thing with Asian food. You know, a takeout Asian place versus one of, you know, our restaurants or other restaurants that are really trying to push, you know, good quality food, good service, good, you know, good atmosphere and decor and everything. You know, they're 2 completely different different things. And like, while a lot of people might say that like this dish is expensive, but if you take that same amount of, you know, like a pork chop, right? You take a pork chop, same amount of meat, same cut, same purveyor, same farm, and you go to, you know, a new American place, and you say, okay, $27, no problem. You go to an Asian place, wow, $27, that's like, you know, I can get it for $12, you know, at Chinatown. Yeah, but like they're buying commodity meat, they're giving you a thin, you know, thin crappy pork chop or whatever it is, you know, like it's a completely different item. and it should be compared with cuisine, like from any culture, that's doing it at the same kind of level. Like same thing with like atmosphere and decor, and a lot of what you actually pay for in a restaurant is an experience, is service, is decor, music, lighting, and just like being able to go there, have a good time, relax, and that that's worth something versus going into a like a fluorescent lit
which is a great experience.
which can also be a lot of fun, but
it depends on the mood and the day. Like I love going there and eating that food too, but I think that together as Asian Food Mafia, we are trying to elevate that experience at an Asian restaurant.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, definitely it sounds like one of the challenges with Asian food in New York, and I think elsewhere, is kind of the stigma associated with Asian food. And it makes it more difficult to open and have a successful Asian restaurant. What are some of the ways in which I think kind of being in the Asian cuisine space has helped or inspired or kind of changed how you've run your restaurant and how you've set the goals for yourself as a chef?
That's still working. I mean, I always, when it comes down to it, I always look deep inside my heart and feel like this is the story I want to share. This is something that's near and dear to my heart because this is my culture, my family, and I want to be able to share it with the world, or that's what I'm trying to do.
I mean, like, I think, while we did choose to open Asian restaurants, I think it really, it chose us because of our culture and heritage. I mean, we've all worked in Western restaurants. Like, I worked for years in Fine French and Park Ave Cafe and you've worked in
Jean George.
Yeah, Jean George and everything. So we've seen the American side, the French side, and we've done that, and are perfectly capable of opening a French bistro or Italian place, or we're all talented chefs and we're all perfectly capable of doing it. But this is a culture that in one way or another we came up in, and so it kind of chooses you. It almost has a way, but it's something that you definitely want to turn around and be able to share, and expand people's understanding of the food and the culture, and kind of also help evolve it too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think as Asian food goes, whether it's Chinese, Vietnamese, a mix. It's mainstream now. There's a lot of interest in it, but I don't like what you were talking about as far as price points. I don't think it's hit its sweet spot yet in terms of point of views. So, while somebody can have a $1 slice and still appreciate paying $30 for a DeFara's pizza or a wood-fired oven pizza, some of that hasn't translated over to Asian food yet as well. And there is, no matter how well you cook, no matter what kitchen you've been brought up in, and how much you stick to that discipline of using great ingredients, using technique that is, I guess, kind of connected to going the extra mile in the kitchen, some of that doesn't get appreciated as well, and people just kind of stick to what they've known for food in Chinatown or food on the lower end scale. So, it still hasn't been told, and that's why we're here, and we're doing our best to try to make that a thing, and to stand out and say, hey, it's the 21st century. There's lots of Asian people in America. There's lots of Asian people in New York City, and we can make this food in the image that we want to, and the way we were brought up with it. And it doesn't always just have to be, $3 orders in Chinatown. It can be something else. I'm not kind of compare it in terms of better, because when I'm getting off work, I go to Chinatown and I love eating in Chinatown. I love eating in Koreatown. I love that food. But when you have your restaurant and you want to make the food you want to, but you want to incorporate the things you grew up loving to eat and grew up loving to cook, but you have all these other things in front of you, like great, sustainable, responsible ingredients, like a brigade of cooks that have an ambition to cook things with the higher technical skill. You want to bring those things together. I mean, that's a great thing. You want to show that off. And there are certain stigmas in the culture of this city and in the culture of this country that are kind of not letting that happen quick enough. So that's one of our goals, is to kind of speed up that evolution of food in terms of Asian cuisine. So, you know, I think we're getting there, you know?
What are the changing, or yeah, go ahead.
Well, there's little exceptions. Like, you know, people will pay $300 a head for sushi, you know, no problem, you know. But they won't pay $300 a head for Chinese food, you know, and that's really like what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and we've discussed this as a group. We've really thought about it. Like, we've had some articles and like reporters like talk to us about, like, you know, what do you think about these, you know, like why that is. And, you know, it does come back to, you know, like we've thought about it, like we've you know, it kind of comes back to the culture of, you know, how a certain culture was brought to America, how a certain, you know, like whether, you know, it was refugees that came across, or whether it was like in the case of Japanese cuisine, a lot of American soldiers went to Japan and experienced Japanese cuisine at its finest, and then came back with a taste for sushi and an understanding of the quality. And whereas like with a lot of like Chinese and South Asian cuisine or cultures, you know, it's refugees that came across. It was you know, like in the case of Chinese, it was you know, workers that came across and worked on railways, and you know, they brought what they could of their cuisine, but had to change it for, you know, for local reasons, for local tastes. And that's really where the birth of American Chinese cuisine is from. Like, you go to China, there's no Kung Pao chicken. There's no, like, I mean, General Tso's chicken.
Whoever's seen
yeah,
them.
there, like, have you seen, Searching for General Tso? Like, there is no General Tso's chicken in China. Just none. There's no fortune cookies in China. None.
I love General Tso.
You know, like these are things that that are like, and like sweet and sour pork is a completely different dish, completely 100% different, and that's because, like, you know, like the food that is in the Chinese takeout places, that's an American food. You know, it's you know, it's sweet, it's, you know, it's fast, it's kind of guilty pleasure, but
Yeah, when my parents growing up in a restaurant, we had we had that Asian restaurant upstate New York, and what they cooked for the customers and what we ate for family meal was completely different food, and I didn't consider it. I considered it two different types of food.
Yeah.
You know, now that we grew up in the restaurant industry, now my uncle, my cousin, makes sushi now, and he's laughing all the way to the bank. He's like, I don't even have to cook this stuff. I just cut it and put it on a piece of rice. Way less work for him.
yeah. But, you know, it's kind of how the cultures got introduced to the country, and so when you know, when the initial point of exposure is, you know, cheap Chinese food from a takeout, then all Chinese food becomes like generalized, right? And it becomes cheap. When, you know, the initial, you know, point of contact is, you know, a high-end sushi restaurant, then you just expect sushi to be expensive, and you're okay with paying it. Like, Korean's kind of halfway in between. Like, it can be expensive, it can be cheap, but like, but definitely like Chinese, South Asian, like even Indian, like it's for the most part, like it's considered cheaper. I mean, and like if you think about Western cultures, like Mexican food has the same kind of connotation, right? There are some amazing Mexican cuisines, or like kind of Central American cuisines, but you don't pay for it because, you know, tacos, burritos, those are cheap, you know. And whereas like French, yeah, you pay for it. You know,
Italian.
Italian, sure, you pay for Italian. But like Italian's kind of halfway there as well in New York because like you have some cheap Italian, you have some good Italian. So like really thinking about cultures and how they, you know, how they fit into, you know, the economic structure of America and all that. It's in the back of your head kind of, and you try to find a way. All right, how do we make this, you know, more acceptable, more, you know, like how do we make it better? How do we make it something that not just the Asians in New York appreciate, but like everyone, you know, and you do that, you know.
Yeah, so obviously it's a pain point for our group that, you know, Asian food, Chinese food is expected to be less expensive than any other food out there, right? Like I have a 10-ounce grass-fed New York strip steak on my menu, but I only charge $30 for it. That's because of where I am. Like where I am in Flatbush, like 4 blocks away, there's Chinese takeout joints that have like still bulletproof glass in them, you know, where you can get like a lunch special for like $4, you know, and you could feed like 2 or 3 people from it. So yeah, I guess what we're trying to do is like to erase that, like what's been ingrained in people's head about like what the expectation is of Chinese food. One being quality of ingredients, and second being price point, and then another being service. You know, so it's like, okay, if you step into, and it's not only any of our restaurants, it's just like if you step into a new modern place, like you have to approach it with an open mind. Like you can't carry any of those stigmas with you. Like otherwise you're closing yourself off from the experience. So if you walk into a new place that you haven't tried yet, you don't know anything about, like you have to have an open mind, because if you already have like these preconceptions of them, then you're missing out on the possibilities that, you know, a place could, you know, do for you.
Speaking of preconceptions, I mean, one of the things that you kind of is brought up repeatedly is kind of the Chinese food that people are used to might not even be the Chinese food that kind of Chinese people eat at home, or kind of the immigrants who came here actually still eat at home. So can you talk a little bit more about how you guys, as I think restaurant owners and chefs, kind of walk that line between authenticity, kind of innovation, and also just, you know, cooking the food that you're used to eating?
Well, for me, actually, it takes a different spin because I'm actually now grieving over the loss of a lot of restaurants that I used to go to that are now closed, and you know, a lot of Toisan restaurants in Chinatown, and so those type of restaurants, to go back to like when I grew up, right, in Chinatown, my parents and my grandparents. That whole community came over in the early 1900s. By the 1930s, 40s, 50s, they all started businesses in Chinatown, and they all started restaurants, some of which became iconic through the community in Chinatown. Places that we always would go to for, you know, just to make us happy with food. And you go to today, and most of those restaurants are gone because the owners of those restaurants live the American dream. So they worked hard, they had children, they worked really hard to put those children into college. Those children went to college, grew up, and now they're doctors and lawyers and engineers, and professionals like that. And the restaurant now is old. The owner, who's the father and the mother, are now old, and they can't do the restaurant anymore. Who do they give this restaurant to? The kids don't want it. Right? Kids are now doctors and lawyers. They do not want to go back to Chinatown and run and operate a restaurant. And so those restaurants close, and a new guard comes into Chinatown. You have this new stuff. But I'm not ready to let go of the old stuff yet and move on to the new stuff. I still love those restaurants, and I still really kind of long to eat that food. And so as a chef, I'm trying to, in certain dishes that I do, try to recreate that experience for my customers, just like it made me happy as a kid growing up eating that food in Chinatown. So, you know, it doesn't even, you guys don't even notice it. You're saying goodbye to an era in New York. and this is happening in the Chinese community. It's happening in like the Polish community, in the Eastern European, in the Italian community as well. So it's happening to all those immigrants that kind of came up in America at the same time. But and the good news for some of us is you're seeing a new influx of food and cuisine that's taking over. So in Chinatown, you have the Fujianese, right? So there's a new, a couple new styles of food. A lot of more northern Beijing, Shanghainese food. If you go up to Flushing, it's almost all northern food. And then you have also a new guard like us who have been here and grew up American and are trying to incorporate the Chinese and Asian food that we grew up in, but attaching it to our skills as we learned climbing up the ladder in the New York City restaurant market. So there's lots of cool stuff going on too. But yeah, when I go down to Chinatown and I see like 7 or 8 of the restaurants that I used to go to all the time, I kind of get a little tear, because those days are gone,
Yeah, it's the evolution of cuisine, which is inevitable. It's going to happen. For example, because I know Vietnamese cuisine, the French colonized Vietnam for many, many years. So a lot of the food that, a lot of the classical traditional dishes actually have a lot of French influence on there. And then same with my growing up too. My parents were ethnically Chinese, but they had many, many generations in Vietnam. So when I was growing up, I thought I was eating Chinese food because we identify as Chinese. Then come to realize when I become a teenager, I'm like, oh, ours isn't Chinese food. It's this weird mashup of like Vietnamese Chinese food. And so this is what I serve at the restaurant because it just doesn't exist.
Well, it exists in your family.
It's in the family.
And like Ed said before, we've all worked in Western kitchens, so there's no way that can't influence what we do. And no matter how hard you're trying to be like traditional or authentic, where there's always going to be some kind of integration or.
And I think all the Western restaurants that we kind of came up the ladder were the old school restaurants, militaristic. They broke you down. So you'd get yelled at, food thrown at you.
Like Gordon Ramsay type,
basically, you're abused,
military.
Right? But it does break you down, and then it becomes ingrained in you what you have to do to be to survive and to do well in the kitchen. So it's ingrained in all of us, from chefs that were way better than us at the time, that just stood over you and just knocked the crap out of you.
Beat you down so you can build yourself back up again, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Doesn't happen now though. You get sued.
It's a different world.
So
Completely
sued.
different.
So we're trying
been
to.
about
I think all of us
5
are
years
struggling
since
with
I
that
threw
too.
my last plate
Like
of food out.
this isn't the world that we grew up with the staff that we're seeing these days, and the cooks, the shortage of cooks, that are especially in New York. We've noticed. So.
And on that really intense note, I do want to leave some time for audience Q&A. So if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand. And we don't have any mics, but I can repeat your question. Go ahead.
Yeah, it seems like you guys have like a lot of relatively high-end food, and like I'm pretty into Asian food, and I found like so many, even though it is like you're saying it's mainstream now, but at the same time, like so many people they don't have a clue what Sichuan food is or what a good Chinese noodle is. An amazing number of people don't even know what a banh mi is. So I was just kind of curious, you didn't mention it that much, that like how you're people just don't try the food. Besides just expecting a cheap price, I think people don't even know what the food is. Like something that tastes amazing, they're not even willing to try. So I don't know if you guys as a group, have you like thought about strategies to get more people to try it?
Well, one thing is you got to have a big bullhorn, right? You have to have a voice in these sort of things, and so that's what we're trying to do. And we're here, speaking here in places like this, and hopefully we've touched on a couple of on a couple of buttons that maybe drive you guys to want to explore different avenues of Chinese food. And then, of course, the ultimate equalizer is you have to back it up with talent. You got to make good food. You got to make people that want to try it. This town is highly competitive. And you have to get your voice out there because you have to kind of put yourself apart from everybody else, and that's when they come try. And then when they do try, it has to be good. So it's really simplistic for us and for me as a chef to get that word out, and it starts organically. And then, sometimes you get some breaks and you get some good things happening to you, and, that word spreads, and the more the merrier. So the more people that have that voice and are speaking out and saying, come check out this food and come check out what we're doing, then the ball starts rolling from there, at least for me.
Yeah, and I think in New York, I'm sorry.
No,
In New York is a great platform for this too, because it's just so diverse here. And there's so many cultures that are coming together, and I think people are excited to learn about someone else's culture through the food. That's how I experience other people's culture, is the first time is always through the food. And that makes me excited. Not because of
I think the question was, like, people haven't been to China, so how do they know what authentic food is, and how do we, like, plan, or do we have a plan to educate people on what, like, say, authentic Szechuan food is, right?
Yeah, or just to get people to even try it. Like, I mean, I've been to Yunnan Kitchen. Just a lot of places they might be good and no one even steps foot in it, regardless of the price.
Right, because they don't know what Yunnan is, right? Like, what does that mean, and why should I come in here and try this? Is that what you're asking? Well, I mean, that's what this group is all about. I mean, we're trying to, like, raise our voice as one, and we promote each other, and that's pretty much the whole plan, aside from opening doors and using social media and doing events like this. Yeah.
I mean, this is the thing about like doing a restaurant kind of in a modern, like, for lack of a better term, a Western way, versus like an old school, like old Asian way. All those restaurants that Chris was talking about, like the old school Asian restaurants or Chinese restaurants in Chinatown, they didn't have social media. They didn't have, they had a base of Chinatown residents that came and that was their bread and butter. Nowadays, you have to market to everyone. You have to do Twitter, Facebook,
the face
Instagram.
Of marketing is changing too. So
like that's changing.
A learning curve for all of us.
And then just like the way that it's presented is changing, and like that's kind of what we're not just a Vietnamese restaurant. We're not just a Chinese restaurant. We're part of. We're like showing that like we're doing everything just as good as everyone else. Like you walk by most of our places, and it could be, like it could be something else. It could be another, like it could be a Western restaurant. You don't know. And as soon as you go up to the window and you read the menu, and you're like, okay, this is something I haven't tried before. Now, getting people to try things that they haven't tried before, that's always difficult depending on the person. I ask our 6-year-old, if he wants to try this, and sometimes he will and sometimes he won't. And like he's quite adventurous, and like so he'll eat fish eyeballs, but you turn around to someone else and they're like, no, I'm not gonna eat that. But like the more exposure I think that people get of the culture, of the cuisine, like they become interested, and I mean, I think it's with anything. Once you try it a few times, you're like, all right, that was interesting. I see where that's going, and I want to try something more. It's kind of like the first time you tried coffee, it was horrifically bitter and terrible, and you loaded it up with sugar and milk, and then now you can't live without your $8 coffee, shade grown, organic, and single source, because like you've grown to appreciate the what is nice, what is good about certain things, and with food, any good chef will tell you like there's a balance, there's a balance of like the basic flavors, sweet, salty, sour, and bitter, and like beyond that, texture and umami and all those things. But like you can tell a good dish when you try it. You can tell like, all right, this noodle is got bounce, it's got spring, and like it's lively in my mouth, versus a noodle that's like mush, and like this tastes like oatmeal. Like that's not a good noodle. But the more you try it, the more the more you're gonna find. All right, this is actually good. This is I like this more and more and more. And I'm gonna find better and better versions of it. And like it just takes experimentation. I think that's part of hopefully what this world is is growing to, is that people like look at other cultures and are interested in other cultures beyond their own, and are then they start to learn and accept other cultures, and like people get along better, and and the world's a better place.
By the way, if anybody has not tried any of our restaurants, you guys are totally invited to come
It's a
and
place to start.
check us out for sure.
We have time for one, or maybe we can try to fit in two. It's you first.
So I think there are recently some of the high-end restaurants in China opened their franchise in New York City, like one the Doron, which one is the popular in China for Peking duck, is opening a franchise in Times Square. So they also have very good service and decor, and also pretty authentic food, I think. But unlike you guys, they have a little connection to the local culture and local. They have their manager, owner, or the chef, they just directly come from China. So what do you think? Like, what's your opinion on those kind of franchise? What do you think they will have impact on the ecosystem of the Asian restaurant here in New York City?
Just to repeat that
Yeah.
question, since it was a bit quiet. So the question was about restaurant franchises that were high-end in China but are actually opening branches here in America. How does that impact kind of how you guys are running your restaurants and how the Asian food scene is in general?
I think it's great. Chef Dong has Michelin star. He's reached out to us to help him with the local market. I do wish him a lot of luck, because it helps us. It helps it helps a franchise like that, Michelin star chef, to come in here and say, this is what Peking duck is, and we're going to charge you $100 a person, and this is what you're going to pay, and this is the quality and the standard that it is. And it helps us. It helps us a lot.
The louder the voice.
Because of his credibility and
And-
the credibility that comes with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure 10, 15 years ago he would come with that much bravado and be set up to at least be set up to be successful, like what looks like what's coming. 10, 15 years ago, it may not have been a big thing, or not even newsworthy. So, yeah.
Cool. Let's do one more question.
I feel like one significant exception to the like Chinese and Vietnamese food kind of having difficulty being able to market is like in like sort of fusion cuisine. And I'm not really familiar with your establishment. It sounds like you're mostly, at least not intentionally, marketing yourselves as that. You mentioned some of the influence was unavoidable. And I was kind of curious how you felt about that space, which on the one hand kind of has been really successful and like enabled experimentation, but on the other hand, like does seem to be like mostly targeted at white people.
So this question about fusion cuisine and how generally it seems like it's targeted at a higher end audience and has been fairly successful, and kind of how your restaurant sits in that space.
Everybody looking at me?
Everybody.
Yeah, well, the whole fusion movement was great, because if it weren't for that, then every Asian restaurant or any other fusion restaurant would just be whatever the region that it's from, right? Being that it's fusion, it makes it more approachable to like anybody, right? So if they add flavors that are familiar to the locals, then they're going to be more apt to try it, right? So yeah, the fusion thing was great. Though I hate the term fusion myself, because that came about for a lack of better words to describe something, and it was from Nobu, where he does Peruvian and Japanese, and it was in the review that he was like, oh, he does this fusion thing, so that term caught on. But yeah, it's great, just like high-end chefs from other parts of the world, regardless of where they're from, coming here to New York to elevate their cuisine. It's anything that builds awareness is a good thing, and without having to cheapen yourself by saying, oh, I'm not so authentic or I'm not so traditional because I add other influences in, doesn't take away. It just makes it more approachable and for the average Joe to understand.
Like the one caveat is that to successfully fuse cuisines, you have to understand both, or whatever you're mixing, and that's where I think a lot of really where fusion got a kind of a bad rap.
We're not doing
And
it.
like in the 90s, they were just fusing like kung pao macaroni or something like that. And if you really understand the essence of whatever you're putting together, then you can pick out the best parts of it and make it work on a palate level, on a texture level, on and even on a conceptual level where you have a history of the dish, and it kind of gives more reason for being. I mean, Vietnamese itself is a fusion cuisine. It's a fusion of South Asian and French, naturally though, because it took time. It took generations, of French, French influence and Asian influence coming together.
That's such a cool thing, though, right?
Yeah, that is such a cool thing when it does happen.
And now it's considered banh mi's are considered a traditional Vietnamese.
Yeah. So fusion and innovation isn't a bad thing. It's only when it's done wrong, when it's done thoughtlessly and carelessly that it becomes bad.
That's actually all the time we have. But thank you so much for joining us and telling us your stories. If you have any further questions, I mean, all these chefs are at the restaurants, and you should definitely visit. And I think that'll be it. So thank you all for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.